Hi all, so I'm just going to show you quickly how to change this into a 1/4 inch site model. To begin with, this site model I sent you is at 1 foot equals 1 foot scale. It's at 1:1 scale. One way I can check that is if I go into top view and I look at the row houses over here, I can do a DIST enter and just measure the distance from there to there. They're about 20 feet wide. That's about right for like a fairly wide row home. The more narrow ones, like one of these, should probably be, let's see what that one is. That one's like 15 feet. I think the narrowest ones in Baltimore are around 11. So if you see a really narrow home, it should probably be somewhere between 11 and 15. The beefier ones are probably like between 20 and 25. I can also check the road distance. So if I look at like this major road over here, that's like 26 feet across. Generally, a road will be around 20 feet across. So I know that this is approximately the right size. And since I broadened it scale, I know it's the right scale. Okay, so this is 1 foot equals 1 foot. So if I am just looking to print from here, this already has contour lines. I can make them a different color so they're a little bit more visible. So these brown lines are contour lines and they're 2 feet apart. Those were pre-made. So let's say I just want to print out my site with 2 foot contours on an 11 by 17 at 1/4 inch scale. I would go to File, Print, and then Tabloid is good, Adobe PDF is good. I want to do vector output. That means lines, not images. If I had images, I would do raster output. And then I'm going to make sure this here says 1/4 inch scale. And then I'm going to move my window. So I would zoom out and look for my window. Where is this window? Let's just draw one and see what happens. Okay, so let's see if it'll let me move it now. I'm going to say I want between here and here. So the issue is right now I don't know where the window is. It should be like a gray box. It's just that this whole thing is so big that I'm totally not seeing it. So one way I can get around this probably is like changing my scale. Actually, let's move it here. Okay. Now can I see it? There it is. Okay. So I can now move this to wherever my site is. Let's say my site is... Now notice like you can't fit a whole lot of 1/4 inch scale on here, right? Like 11 by 17 is pretty small. I can fit like a path. I can fit like part of the river. Let's say my site is right around here maybe. So that's all that's going to fit onto my paper. If I were going to do a 1/16 inch site, I could change the scale here. Now you can see I'm starting to fit more onto my paper. Okay, so that's if you were just printing it, and then you would go ahead, print your PDF, and that would all work out. For making a site model, I generally, when I'm making a digital model, I like to make the whole model itself at the right size in Rhino. The reason I do that is because when you have material thickness, it's nice to be able to model the thickness at the size it actually is. So for example, like I prefer to, if I'm cutting out walls for a model, I would rather draw my wall thickness as 1/8 if it is really 1/8 rather than having 1 foot walls. And then I know when I scale it down to 1/8 inch scale, they'll be 1/8 inch. I just think it's easier to have the whole thing at 1/8 inch scale. So that said, what I want to do is actually bring this entire site model down to 1/4 inch scale. So to do that, I'm going to delete the contours I have. I don't want those. So I'm going to delete layer. Yes, and actually I'm going to resave this so I don't lose that altogether. So save as 1/4 sample, save. Okay, and then I'm going to unlock all of these so that I can scale them. And I'm going to delete my other contours layer. Next thing I want to do is I want to actually scale everything. So right now my file is in feet. I can double check that. Yep, I'm in feet. I'm going to take everything and I'm going to scale it down to 1/12 of the size. So I'm going to go across and type in scale, give it the origin point. I can just use point anywhere. And my scale factor is going to be 1/12. That means it's going to be 1/12 as small. So now that basically did the foot to inch conversion. So now this is scaled so that 1 inch in my model is 1 foot in real life. Okay, but I want it at 1/4 inch scale. So I'm going to do that one more time, except now I'm going to scale it by 1/4. So scale, give it a point anywhere, 1/4, enter. Okay, so now this whole thing is at 1/4 inch scale, and I'm just going to move it so it's a little bit closer to my origin. Okay, other thing I want to do is I just want to change my units over to inches. So I'm going to hit type units, change this to inches. And I probably want my precision a little bit closer than that. So maybe I'll do 1/32 of an inch, feet in inches. Okay. Scale ball models by 12, say yes. So now I just want to double check. Before I said that I think these wider homes were 20 feet wide. So let's see how wide they are now. They are now 4 inches wide. 4 and something. So let's think if that makes sense. So if they were like around 20 and then 20 feet, then they would go into 20 inches. And if I divide that by another 4, it's going to be around 4 or 5. So that makes sense. Okay, so this is now at 1/4 inch scale. Next thing I want to figure out is where my site is and how big. I'm going to delete those. I don't need this anymore. Okay. How big the 11 by 17 sheet of paper is. So actually, I think the laser cutter will do 12 by 18s. I don't really know your laser cutter. You'll have to figure out how big your site model is. So I'm just going to make a 12 by 18 inch box. I'm going to pretend that's big enough. But realize that like when you draw your model, so let's say you just kept the site dimension. So let's say you did like a 30. We're going to draw it at full scale and then scale down. So if I did like 30 by 20, 30 by 20, and then let's say I had the other one I think is slightly bigger, so I'll make this slightly smaller. So I'm just going to scale this down a tiny bit. So and then this all gets scaled by scale 1/4. Okay, so let's say that my pavilion and my park piece are about this big and they're this far apart. Like they're not going to fit on the 12 by 18. So I might need to make this a bigger square and have 2 of them. The size of your site model just depend on your piece. Whereas if like these are really close together and everything I need to explain is like right in here, 12 by 18 might be perfectly big enough. So you'll need to figure out how large your plan is and how big of an area you need to cut out in order to make sense of it. Okay, but I'm pretending mine is 12 by 18. So I'm going to move that over to where my site is. I don't remember where I said my site was going to be. Let's pretend it is right here in between, I don't know, by these like paths. Maybe I'm going to like put something right in the middle of those paths. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I want to contour this whole thing. So I have in 3D what that looks like, but I don't have the contours I need in order to build my model. I'm going to pretend that my cardboard is 1/8 of an inch wide. So I want a contour line every 1/8 of an inch in order for me to make this accurate. You should measure your cardboard. It might be 3/16. It could be 1/4, just depends on what cardboard you're getting. So to start out with, I need a base plane. So I'm going to use this to get a base plane. Just drawing this nice and flat. If I go into front view, I want to make sure that that base plane is underneath everything. It's not, so I'm going to move it down a little bit. Okay, so now it's underneath everything. Great. And I'll do planar surf to give it so it actually has, just so it's more visible that it's actually a plane. Now I'm going to type in contour. Select objects for contour. That will be my topo. Hit enter. Then it asks for my contour base point. I'm going to give it the corner of this plane I made. And then direction perpendicular to the contour planes. I want to build up So I'm going to come this way, and then finally it asks me distance between contours. And here's where I type in my material thickness. So I'll do 1/8 an inch. Now, your computer might hate this, right? This is a lot of work for you to cut all these contours. You might want to trim away everything you need before you contour it. But I already started doing it this way, so we're going to do it this way. So it's thinking. Still going. Okay, I think it got the whole park now, so I'm just going to hit escape so that it stops having to make lines. All those lines get pretty heavy for it. Okay, so let's change them from red. That red is pretty glaring. Let's make it, I don't know, green. Okay, and then the other thing that would be helpful is I made that little rectangle, that same layer, which was not smart. So let's change that. Let's make this on, I'm going to move it to this layer just so we can see it. Okay, so as you can see, it's actually very hilly over here. I might, because it's so hilly, I probably want to use a thicker material. If I had 1/4 inch, if I had something at 1/4 inch, this would be a lot less work. This is going to be a lot of pieces to cut. But let's say I'm going to go ahead and use this. Actually, no way, I'm not going to do that. It's too many things. So I'll show you on a less complicated, less hilly part of the site. So let's say I'm over here by the river, and I just have I have a couple of contours to deal with and the river. Okay, so this is my 12 by 18. I'm going to extrude it. And I'm going to click on here so it changes size. I want it to go all the way through everything. Okay, so see how that's all the way through everything. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to get rid of anything that's not on that piece. So I'm going to select, everything other than that. So I'm going to select everything. And then I'm going to deselect this and then type in split. And then my cutting object is going to be the pink thing. And then hit enter. So it's going to think, it's thinking about it. Okay, I think it's all done. So now I should be able to delete everything else. So if I come up here and let's see enclosed, yep, I can delete all this stuff out. And it should just keep in the few lines that are going to be part of my site model. I can move this. I don't need to keep it all right here. Uh-oh. Okay. So I can move this over here, get it out of the way. I can delete all of that because I don't need that anymore. This is my site. I'm going to move this closer to my origin so I can find it. I can zoom in all my views if I do Z, enter, S, enter. And if I want, I can just click on this, Z, enter, S, enter, Z, enter, S, enter, Z, enter, S, enter. Okay, great. So now I have that selected. So for the model I'm making, I don't really need the topo anymore, right? Like that's not actually doing anything for me at this point, so I can delete that. What I really want is all these things flat, and I also don't need this, so I'll delete that. So I'm going to select this and type in project to C-plane and delete input subjects, yes, okay. So I'm now going to make copies of this. The very bottom piece, this thing, that's going to be my first layer, which is just my base layer. Then I'm going to take all this, copy. Let's copy it up a bunch, then we'll see how many times we actually need it. Okay, so let's say this is probably my, oh, I should have copied this onto my base layer. So that is my water, and I'm going to score that into my bottom piece because it's at the very bottom. And then I can either paint this, or I could make this a whole hatch pattern so it's scored, but you at least want that score line in there so you know where the water starts. Okay, then here, this is my first piece. This is going to be my first kind of hill piece, so I'm going to trim off the rest of that. This I'm going to change to this layer. And actually, let me just make 3 clean layers. So I'm going to call 1 layer cut and 1 layer score. Okay, so my cut layer I'll make red, and my score layer I'll make green. Okay, so this is being cut, and I want to join those together and change to my cut layer, change object layer. This is now being cut. So I right click on here, change object layer. I want to score in where my other contours are. The reason I do that is so that I know where to place them. That's especially helpful if I have something that like is maybe a mountain, so it's like high in the middle. I'm not going to know where the other layers of cardboard go if I don't do that. So rather than doing it that way, okay, now I'm just going to copy this up. So from here to here, I'm going to trim all that off. Okay, change this layer. Okay, and now join those together. Okay, a couple more times. Trim, join, change object layer. Last time. Okay, so now these are ready to be laid out onto whatever sheets you're cutting for the laser cutter. So like obviously this is not hard to realize what order they go in. If it were complicated, you might want to also score in some kind of a system for yourself so that you could remember where things go. But then I would just layer these on top of each other, and that would be the base for my model. If I were doing this, I would actually, and I knew like exactly where it was going already, my final piece, I would actually also probably score in the footprint of my piece so that I knew where it goes on here. But since you're doing study models, you might just want to leave it at this point. That's it. Let me know if you have questions.